And hello, my fabulous students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I am excited to be with you today. Today, we're going to talk about maritime empires developing between 1450 and 1750. This is Unit 4 of the AP curriculum. Let us begin. So, first thing you need to understand is there's a commercial revolution happening. It's going on. Um, Based on all the influx of gold and silver that's being found in the Americas, it's getting dumped into the economy of Europe. And so there are changes that are happening as a result of all this. So this affected all regions of the world, not just Europe, because a lot of that stuff, all that gold and silver, will eventually make its way to East Asia and South Asia because of all the goods that they want to trade there as well. Um, so there's a few factors to keep in mind that resulted from this commercial revolution. Okay, so we have the development of European overseas colonies that are happening. Number two, we have the opening of new ocean trade routes, especially the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean trade route, and now with the Atlantic triangular trade route. All these are new trade routes that hadn't been around before, so commerce is increasing. You got population growth happening, especially with the increase of trade and the Columbian exchange with corn and potatoes and things like that. And then you also have inflation happening with all this gold and silver being dumped into the world economy as it circulates. Then, as gold and silver become more plentiful, it loses its value. So due to inflation especially, we're going to see it's going to lead to this price revolution that's going to take effect because of the devaluing of those currencies for a time. So, some ideas that led to people investing in trade companies that also lead to the commercial revolution. Okay, number one, you need to know are joint stock companies. These are people who invest money and capital in companies and shared in both profits and the risks. So now we have this idea where you could have people get together and create this company made up with many people, and the government doesn't even really need to be a part of this. It's privately owned, and those who are investing in it, they get to share in both profits and risk, which means you either succeed really well or you can fail miserably, but they'll allow you to do either one. Number two, you have an idea called limited liability. Even today, we call them LLCs. If you'll look here in the um, in the picture over here, we call them limited liability companies, LLCs. This is where an investors were not only responsible for what they invested into the company, and not any of the company's debts. So they were only responsible for the money that they put into the company as an investor. So if they put in 50,000 as an investor into this company, then the company, if it went under, they can't go to that investor and say you owe more money because you invested. No. He or she um, gave 50,000, so that's what they can lose. Does that make sense? So you lose your initial investment. And so what that does is just sort of safeguards people um, from losing more than they actually invested, which makes people a little bit more comfortable to go ahead and invest because they have an idea of what's the worst they can lose in that regard. We have trading companies that are also emerging. So since Spain and Portugal practice mercantilism, and again, mercantilism is this more exports and imports, the acquiring of precious metals, all that stuff. their governments were heavily involved in their economies. And with the government involved in the economy, this doesn't give as much freedom for private investors to kind of, get in as well, because the government typically doesn't like competition. So, um, so Portugal and Spain, they're going to be heavily mercantilism, which means the governments are going to be more involved in their economies. However, the Dutch and the English and even the French eventually, they'll enjoy freedoms for private investors. Okay, these are joint stock companies or limited liabilities. So as a result, we're going to start seeing companies being born, pretty powerful companies. The first company that gets born or created is the British East India Company in 1600, and then the Dutch East India Company. Again, these are companies that are largely privately owned by many different people who have invested large amounts of money, and they share in the risk and the reward of their ventures. We also have the triangular trade that's happening. So with the triangular trade, African slave trade route that was broken up into three segments. So they would start in Europe, and from Europe they would load up the ship full of manufactured goods like firearms and liquor and other things, and then they go down to Africa, and then they would sell those things, usually for African slaves, and they would then load up their ships full of African slaves to be transported across the Atlantic Ocean. Usually took about 6 weeks or so. And then in the Americas, they would sell the African slaves, and then they would load up their ships with sugar and tobacco to transport right back to Europe. And so this is called the triangular trade, which becomes very popular because of manufacturing happening in Europe, slavery happening or I should say, slave trading happening in Africa, and then the need for slavery or coerced labor in the Americas, and the abundance of sugar and tobacco that could be taken back to Europe. So by the 1700s, the Caribbean sugar production and rum, which is made from sugar, um, were making Britain extremely rich and powerful. We also have new monopolies happening. So monopolies will develop. This grants certain merchants exclusive trading rights in various regions. This was accomplished by joint stock companies or through governments. So again, we have the East India companies, both the Dutch and the British. They're going to create monopolies in places such as India, Malay, which would be like um, Malaysia today, and the Spice Islands. The Dutch will secure a strong foothold, which is modern day Indonesia. And the Spanish government, they're also going to start creating some monopolies because, again, they were the first in Americas. So they're going to create monopolies for anything tobacco that's either grown domestically or in the Americas. And this will give Spain 1/3 of their total revenue that they pull in each year, just alone. So monopolies become a thing, and again, monopolies are a place where you get that exclusive trading rights, and no one else gets to create competition, which is good for those who have monopoly, but bad for those who are trying to come in. Also, with the monopoly, then pricing isn't as competitive because why do you need to lower your prices if they have to buy from you? We have some syncretic belief systems happening in the Americas due to African slavery. So syncretic means a blending of things together, usually cultures. So African slaves combined their West African religious traditions with aspects of Christianity, such as in drumming and dancing. So we have Santeria, which is originates in Cuba. It's the blending of Yoruba religion in West Africa and Roman Catholicism. We have Vodun, or maybe some of you know it as voodoo. It originates in Haiti, okay? And again, it's the blending of religious traditions from the Benin, West Africa region, and again, Roman Catholicism. So we have these African slaves who are coming over, and they're bringing their traditions over. And this is mainly in the Caribbean where a lot of these two are happening, right? In Cuba, Haiti, okay? Then we have um, candomblé, which is created in Brazil. And that's once again a blending of West African and Roman Catholic traditions. Candomblé means dance to honor the gods. And so we're seeing that these hybrid traditions and religions and beliefs starting to form as a result of syncretism. And remember that the two most populated places where African slaves were transported was uh, the Caribbean by far and Brazil. Those are the two, and the reason why is because that's where the sugar uh, cane plantations were most dominant due to the climate. We also see syncretism with the natives to the Americas as well. So remember that in Europe during this time period, Roman Catholic Church, they're starting to lose members because they've been challenged by this Protestant movement, such as Martin Luther, John Calvin, and King Henry VIII, who are some of these Protestant leaders. And so the Roman Catholic Church, then at the Council of Trent, decided, okay, we need to create a missionary force. Well, some of those missionary forces, one was known as the Jesuits, and there were other groups as well, but they formed and they decided that they would focus on the Americas to sort of spread Christianity and to gain converts. So natives to the Americas being introduced to Christianity, they're also going to combine their um, their original beliefs with Catholicism. And one of the most obvious representations of this is found in the Virgin of Guadalupe. So here, if you look at the bottom, this is the Virgin Mary, which is the mother of Jesus. This is how they do this in Spain, Portugal. She's very fair skinned because they're fair skinned in Western Europe. However, if you look above, this is a picture of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And you can notice immediately is that there's a darker complexion to her skin. And one of the reasons why they did this was because people want to feel connected to a holy figure that they're worshiping. And with the Virgin Mary being fair skinned, a lot of people in Mexico region didn't really feel all that connected, if you will, to this fair-skinned Mary. So what they did is they took Guadalupe, which was a belief already from them, and they sort of merged Guadalupe with the idea of Mary, and they give her darker skin, and they also they 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 look at her as someone who could perform miracles, can make their life better if they reverence her and honor her, very similar to the Virgin of Mary. And so that's pretty much it. Go ahead and write your one-page summary, and we'll talk about this when we come back. Thanks, guys.